Hey y'all. Today we're going to be talking about doll reproductions, how reproductions affect the collector's market, whether they can reduce the original doll's value, and what about the authenticity of said reproduction. The next wave of Bratz reproductions have leaked onto the internet. Among them we have one of the most sought after and highest priced Bratz dolls, full stop, Campfire Felicia. Now doll Twitter and Instagram has been set ablaze upon seeing the news, and there have been some heated debates and discussions between various sectors of the fanbase. I do think it's kind of a shame that instead of having a fanbase come together and celebrate a release like this, it ends up being the cause for nasty remarks and put-downs, but that's par for the course in this day and age, and no fandom is safe from this. In this video, I want to carefully approach the subject of doll reproductions from a more neutral perspective and take a look at Bratz and Monster High adult doll collecting, as these two brands are fairly new to the game, and compare them to more veteran brands like Barbie, as that can be quite insightful, so stay tuned. It was just a few days ago where I looked back and thought, it's kind of crazy how quickly Bratz, but also Monster High in particular, have started catering to an adult doll collecting demographic with reproductions and collector dolls. And in that case, it struck me as being a tad opportunist and not all that organic feeling, and I'm gonna tell you why. Let's rewind and take a look back at the inception of modern day adult catered doll collecting in general, so you can get my point. I think we have to mostly thank Billy Boy for that. Billy Boy was a prodigy of Andy Warhol's, and in the early to mid 80s he showcased the hundreds if not thousands of what we now like to call vintage Barbie dolls and fashions he had accumulated at that point. He was a fashion doll aficionado, and him coming out with his collection made people as well as Mattel as a company see that there is indeed a market for adult doll collecting out there. So by 1985 we got the Billy Boy designer collab Barbie, and in 1986 Andy Warhol drew a portrait of Barbie. This really was the watershed moment that laid the foundation for adult doll collecting as we know it today. But that was also 26 to 27 years after the first Barbie doll came out. Now let's come back to the here and now, and Monster High has been on the market for 13 years. I doubt that the brand has matured enough to have a solid foundation to have a proper adult doll collecting niche for it to be built on. Like, I'm not shitting on the fan base or the brand here, but there's not enough meat to the bone and history here to dive into, and not enough artists, designers and people in the creative fields to have been inspired enough to create something truly outstanding for the brand, as there had been done with the Barbie brand at the point in time when Barbie turned towards adult doll collecting. Like, I believe the first proper adult catered doll released by Mattel for Barbie came out in 1990, so a total of 31 years after her launch. That was the Barbie in all gold designed by Bob Mackie. And it took Barbie 35 years to release the first reproduction of the iconic swimsuit Barbie. 35 years. It's interesting that with Monster High, the biggest chunk of their adult catered collector releases are reimaginings of already existing horror properties, which further cements my point here. They do not have artists from the world of fashion design come and create something wholly unique, but rather replicate intellectual properties with already existing identities. What I'm getting at here is that there needs to be a maturing stage for a brand or intellectual property to go through, to reach a point where you can take a step back and evaluate the history of said brand. Like, you cannot force this onto a consumer. Here, there's your adult collector doll. Now shut up. You also need to have designers and people who work in the creative fields to reach a point in their professional life where they're able to take the inspiration from the toys that they played with as a child and put that into their work. I don't see a Jeremy Scott for Moschino collection happening anytime soon for Monster High, because the brand is too fresh to have had a lasting impact on the cultural zeitgeist. Which brings us to Bratz, as they're kind of like in the middle ground here. I believe the Bratz Wii Files as well as Hayden Williams designer collaborations came out in 2015 and 2018 respectively, and even though the first edition Core 4 dolls got re-released multiple times during Bratz's initial run, it wasn't until the 20th anniversary in 2021 when we got the first officially branded reproductions to come out. By that time, Bratz nostalgia was in full swing, and a lot of people came out the woodworks showing their appreciation for the brand in terms of how it inspired them both creatively creatively, as well as in terms of what it meant to them personally. Now the tragic thing though here is that unlike Barbie back then as well as Monster High now, Bratz has become sort of a legacy brand, so since no new original Playline products are being released, there's no potential for the brand to further the initial legacy they had built, thus branching out and carving out a new path for a new generation. Which now in turn brings us to the reproductions. I know you've been waiting for me to talk about that as I've been going on and on about other stuff. Okay, the new reproductions consist of Funk Out Fiona, Campfire Felicia, Welcome to Fabulous Tiana, as well as a Dana that I can't quite pinpoint. While I generally don't have that big of an opinion on the quality of the reproductions themselves, I am happy to be able to purchase both Tiana as well as Felicia without breaking the bank, and the way they look is satisfying enough to me, even though they seem to be cut down releases of the original ones. Now if you follow me on Instagram and watch my stories, you do know that I'm not as happy with the release of Fiona though. Funk Out Fiona in her first outfit is one of my absolute favorite Bratz dolls and wears one of my favorite Bratz doll outfits. And from the leaked images, I'm not really vibing with her as much. The reproduction looks more like Yasmin than Fiona to me, the hair color is off, and since they use nylon instead of saran, that's also a bit of a no for me. The top looks bulky, the fabric doesn't lay flat as smooth, the colors are off, it looks way too eggplant and not Bordeaux enough, and the denim pants she's wearing don't have that used distressed washing in the front, and it looks all very clean. She's also missing a headband and her 5 head. And that's probably where opponents and defenders of reproductions butt heads. It's all about the authenticity. When you squint your eyes hard enough, it kind of gives the same vibe, but not really. The materials used are kind of similar, but not really. And it all tries to evoke the original, but it isn't the original. And I think that's something that either side of the coin kind of needs to accept and move on instead of trying the hardest to flip off the other. And that's where my whole explanation from adult doll collecting in general comes into play now. I think Bratz collecting hasn't matured enough yet, and I'm not talking about mature as in near to juvenile, I'm talking mature in terms of experiences gained throughout a period of time. Which is why these fights on doll Twitter tend to happen. The people who ended up shelling out $1,000 for the original Campfire Felicia want to defend their purchase decision by putting the reproduction down, saying it's trash. While on the other side you have collectors pointing fingers and saying, ha ha ha, you're a fool for having paid this amount. Look, we now have the reproduction and she'll retail for $25 to $30. While both sides need to understand that one will not replace the other. With Barbie collecting, the adult collecting sphere has matured over half a century now, and there is an understanding for how a swimsuit silkstone reproduction will never be able to replace a true #1 ponytail Barbie. In the grand scheme of things, each one has their place, each one has their worth. I will probably never get a OG vintage ponytail, or any other vintage Barbie doll for that matter. I'm actually quite happy with the reproductions that I have, even though snobby collectors might laugh at those reproductions saying they're not authentic enough. I don't care that much, as long as it gives me that feeling from a vintage Barbie doll that I would like to have. I'm content with having a reproduction and having only paid a Playline price for that. Now with Bratz, we need to understand that the Campfire Felicia has her worth. She will probably also keep her worth, but the reproduction also has its place, but it's not going to replace the original. Because Bratz as a brand is still fairly new, I think it needs to do some maturing and growth in the collecting space for the Bratz collecting community to have a collective collecting experience, so that people would then go on to understand the juxtaposition of worth, value, and authenticity. Now I want to hear from you. How do you see this? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Sound off in the comments down below. Like if you liked this video, dislike if you thought this video was trash, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I might see you in my next video. Bye for now.